So we are referring to God consciousness. Yeah. So excellence must involve all this. But unfortunately, we are referring to a very narrow, limited type of excellence.
Which is rather economic kind of excellence.
Correct.
In the sense of preparing yourself for the working world, that kind of thing lah, kan.
Because again, it's because of language again. Because why we actually think like that is because excellence in the English language is actually referring ultimately to the Latin excelsus, which actually mean above and beyond, which actually mean that kind of excellence is competitive in nature. So that it is there's inbuilt competition, and that's why we have we see students, not just students lah, parents also kan, having mental health issues because we are always having to keep up with the Jones, they call it kan.
And stressing the child out.
Yes, of course, because that kind of excellence shape our vision of truth and reality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I think macam as a parent kan, like how do we, because we are in this culture kan, we are in this system in Singapore. So as a parent, how do we navigate this to and inculcate these things, the excellence that you mentioned tadi to our children?
Kira-kira we can't change the system.
Yeah, we can't change the system.
What values
what can we do
lah basically to
as a parent
help them still navigate the system and also try to include the values that have been taught to us by Imam Al-Ghazali.
Of course, the first thing to do is to understand what is actually being articulated first, and you must understand that first and apply it to yourself first, because ultimately if you fail to do that, then of course your children
we need to educate ourselves.
Yes, of course.
So first you must read his book lah.
Yeah, I'm saying that there are many other books also lah with regard to this matter lah. So we must understand this first. Then of course we can apply it to our locus of control lah. Our children and so on. But secondly also you must understand the realities of the system that we are engaging or confronting with. So that would mean that what kind of understanding, particularly the philosophical and the historical understanding of it. Then of course everything's an experiment. There's the trial and error process. This is what we call jihad lah, kan? So that means you require wisdom.
Because I think an understanding of the virtues that he described earlier, I think that is quite important because sometimes when I teach, I notice that it is not so much, okay, it is about intellectual capacity to some extent, but sometimes I find that there are virtues that are absent and I wish were there in the student, like courage. Okay? Yeah, because
example?
Yes, yeah. So there are students who I teach who they're actually quite smart lah.
Okay.
But they're not daring enough to try.
Try what? Like
macam let's say maths question, and then they get stuck somewhere. And they're not brave to just want to try and maybe try to get it, even get it wrong pun, at least you get something that you can edit.
They're afraid to fail.
So macam they're not, it's not because they lack of, not afraid to fail, they're afraid to macam write something wrong or just don't want to try because they're scared.
Scared of the mistake lah.
Scared of making a mistake basically.
Okay.
So I think it's not for lack of intellectual capacity. They are quite smart students actually. But the prevention of trying, the prevention of themselves of trying shows me that this guy is scared. He lacks a bit of courage. And I think if you're mindful of these dimensions in Al-Ghazali framework, you can actually see what you can do to help him build more courage in that sense. And it's not only courage. I find that it's also
confidence.
It's also emotional response also. Sometimes when they do the exam, they get stuck in one question, they allow that to affect the others. And I think if they're able to recognize that these virtues are somewhat distinct, the hikmah, the syaja'ah, so you don't let your emotions affect your intellect, So I think there are students who are very capable of doing that. Even if they don't have so much intellectual capacity, but they have this ability, diorang boleh actually in the end do well lah. I mean, if that's the goal, to do well in the exam. Being conscious of these virtues can actually help.
Yes.
Right?
Okay, let's say I'm conscious of this virtue, but how do I help myself or like any other student to macam be courageous, be confident? Because macam sometimes we are conscious, okay, we are
That
aware
one
of
I'm
this.
sure Al-Ghazali ada. No, that one I'm sure Al-Ghazali has solutions, right? How to develop syaja'ah.
How to develop?
Does he give recommendations generally?
Of course, that there are some general guidelines. They are so specific pointers with regard to this matter, kan. Of course, the subject matter is very extensive, kan, and you know, I'm not sure whether we can cover this within the limitation of time lah. But this involve a lot of struggle with yourself lah, kan. And that's why that is the common theme that Al-Ghazali always mention. But most importantly, the realization of the end goal must be there first.
Okay.
If you're talking about you know, moving from state A to state B, kan, of course you must understand what is the state that you want to attain first, before you even, you know, talk about trying to achieve that. But most of the time that the end goal is not very clear. And this is also you know, relevant in the context of modern education today. So we talk about, you know, at the end of the day, what is education? Why do you want to be educated in the first place? Kan? You are actually not very clear.
Most people will say to get a good job. I mean that's the mindset it is.
Correct.
And
I mean, from young also we are taught macam, okay, belajar pandai-pandai, dapat kerja bagus. You know?
but in a sense, actually, if you think about it policy-wise, the government is trying to get people to move away from this thinking. Alternative path to success, right? They always say.
But again lah, if we understand why is it like that, kan? It is hard because they are working within a certain paradigm or framework.
Correct.
In educational philosophy, we call it the pragmatist philosophy or the utilitarian type of philosophy. So as long as you operate within that kind of framework of mind, it's very difficult to justify things that are perhaps outside of it. Kan?
Okay.
So we instead of, you know, restricting ourselves, then why not venture out of that, isn't it? That is more inclusive of.
Would the madrasas be able to do that?
And of course, if the madrasas, if they first of all they must have the attempt to understand these things first.
No, but
kan?
the way I see it, macam okay, you are in Singapore, the madrasas are in Singapore, but they can function quite independently. They have their own, like I said, their own curriculum and that. So in a sense,
the potential to inculcate
in a sense, they can actually incorporate some of these things and teach. But okay, maybe I don't talk about the madrasas. Let's say if you were to run a school, okay,
How
in
would
Singapore,
you do it?
if you were to, because at least we know what the ideal is lah in terms of what Al-Ghazali has said about academic excellence. So macam if you were to run a school, let's say for the Malay, let's say 13 to 16-year-olds in Singapore, what would your focus be? What would such a school look like?
I see. So if you are actually, of course, we must also, in order for me, right, hypothetically to achieve that, kan, there must be understanding of psychological development, kan, vis-a-vis the end goal of whatever the academic excellence that we discussed just now, kan. So at that particular stage, what exactly should we actually focus on? Maybe not just at that stage lah. Maybe you're talking about earlier stages and so on, kan.
From 7 years old.
7 years old, so on, kan. So if you're talking about the earlier stages, then of course we need to focus on memory work lah, kan.
Okay.
Memory work is one. The linguistic competency is another. So that is the fundamental of that. For early stages.
When you say
7
memory work means hafal Quran ke apa?
Hafalan lah basically lah,
Hafal Quran.
because that is the stage of your intellectual development where, you know, your memory is strongest. So
Okay,
you need to
at that stage.
you need to
Make the most of it
leverage
lah.
on that particular strength. Okay. So and of course at that particular stage, then the environment must be most conducive, because at that point of time, the most effective pedagogy would be role modeling, isn't it? So they need to be, isolated from harmful elements at that stage. Okay, so at the young stage, these are some of the considerations that to be made.
What do you mean by harmful elements, like gadgets?
Gadgets could be one of them.
Okay.
I'm saying in general harmful elements lah, because they role model after it kan, because they have not yet developed the capacity to reason out kan,
and to discern good from bad lah.
good and bad. So they only just follow.
Okay.
Kan? So harmful element could mean harmful examples kan. So these are some of the major consideration at that stage. Then moving on to the more mature stage, then you can focus on the intellectual, the rational aspect of the human dimension, where then you can talk about mathematics and so on.
That's what I find to be a bit of a problem.
Yes.
Pasal macam we are quite conditioned into thinking that there's a race, and the earlier you can learn things, the earlier the child can read, the better it is. The earlier they can do maths, the better it is. But there's a danger to teaching things that are too early.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
It's not age appropriate.
Yeah, it's better to be age appropriate. And I think that's what Al-Ghazali also said.
Yes, of course.
Talked about.
So I mean, coming to that, it's very interesting, because I was reading the biography of Blaise Pascal.
Blaise Pascal,
Blaise Pascal, very
Pascal triangle.
Yes, Pascal triangle, very important mathematician, the history of mathematics kan. Pascal's father, right? How he taught mathematics. He ensured that Pascal never touched any mathematics at a very young age.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Until what age tu?
Until age probably, if I'm not mistaken, it's above 14. Then he started to teach mathematics. Yeah.
14
Yes.
baru
Yes.
graduate.
And then that's how Pascal became a brilliant mathematician, because he was age appropriate.
Yeah.
No, but before 14, what did he do? What did he learn?
So he focused on languages,
Oh,
the mastery of language,
He was
and many other
speaking,
things lah. So
communicating.
because why the rational capacity is not yet developed.
Oh, okay.
But unfortunately, if we introduce this too early and we stress this too early, of course the child does not have the capacity to understand this.
At worst, they will develop a hatred for it.
Yes, and that is what Al-Ghazali is against, opposed to. When things are not introduced at an age appropriate context.
Imam Al-Ghazali mentioned this also.
Of course.
Ada. Saya nak baca dalam buku.
Yes,
As
yes.
in, you mentioned macam age, like which age to introduce maths.
No. Of course,
No.
not in the specific sense,
Yeah.
but in the general sense.
Okay,
Because he talks about what
okay.
faculties have been developed at what age.
Oh.
So there's the imaginative spirit, then there's the rational, which
Yeah.
comes later on.
Interesting.
No, it's actually very interesting. And the thing is,
Interesting.
this have already been sorted out by our scholars. Cuma we're just not using it in schools and to explain
Yalah, I mean
things
we
yet.
are in Singapore kan.
That shouldn't be an excuse. No, we can still do it lah kan.
We can still do it. I mean, of course, the reality is different. Of course, children have to sit for exams, PSLE. Yeah. So they nak tak nak pun you have to face this. But I think most importantly is you cannot stress them too much, cannot burden them too much, because their psychological development has not reached a stage where perhaps they can understand this in the optimum sense. In the optimum sense. So sometimes you should not be stressing the kid too much, because he or she is not ready for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
So that's another thing we should discuss about
Yeah.
at which age should you introduce reading, at which age you should introduce
yeah, of course,
mathematics
of
and so
course.
on.
Of course.
So at which age do you make the child understand about these virtues, that macam the meaning of the education, or like the purpose of learning?
Of course, if you're talking about the early stage, the role modeling is most important kan. So maybe the understanding is lesser lah. You should not be burdening them with the philosophical understanding of this kan. Then as they mature, maybe at the age 14, then maybe you can start have discussions
I see.
on this.
40 years old.
Yeah, and then as
I think it's not so much a particular age lah. It's a gradual process of inculcating values. I mean, at the early stage is role modeling, so they must see good examples around them. But later on, when they develop more capacity to reason and all that, then we can bring in these things lah. In that sense lah. But so I'm thinking, there's quite a lot that you have shared. I'm quite interested to read your book also. And I think it's quite a number of things to unpack when we address some of the other educational issues lah. But I think what is important is that we see things in the light of what our scholars have taught us over the years. And if we are more mindful and conscious of these things, I think that is actually a step forward.
Yeah.
You know, and we don't just ikutkan the system and let the system guide our actions without having derive the benefits from what Islam has already taught us lah.
Yeah.
In that sense lah.
True.
Okay, insyaAllah. I think that's very good.
Very interesting.
Very interesting lah. So banyak. There's quite a lot more I want to talk about lah, but I think we are short of time already lah.
yeah.
Yeah, listen.
You ada any other questions?
To ask him. Sekejap
Masih.
I fikir dulu apa questions nak ask him But this okay, I want to ask something about competition lah. So over competition is not good, but indifference to competition is also not good.
Yes.
So does Imam Al-Ghazali negotiate or reconcile between the extent to which you should compete, and what should competition ideally look like? Does he talk about this? Ada?
I would like to say that actually the idea of competition itself need to be unpacked.
Okay.
Why exactly you are competing?
Okay.
Usually you compete is because of scarcity.
Okay.
Okay. But you realise that if you're trying to understand this in the Islamic context, kan, there is no scarcity because the source is Allah Taala.
Okay. Understand.
Who has infinite abundance of things.
Of blessings lah.
Yeah. So he's the source of everything. So there is no need to place it in the context of competition. But of course, you're referring to the realities of Singapore education, realities of Singapore living. You have to confront with this, kan?
So it's not good to compete?
No. What we're saying is that there is no need to compete because there is no scarcity when the blessings are from Allah.
Really?
Yes. No, wait. But that is set in the context of peer competition with one another. But there's also competition with yourself.
Okay.
And I think that is the one that is.
Okay, so if you are talking about competition in that sense, kan, in the educational sense, kan, Imam Al-Ghazali also mentioned in Riyadatun Nafs, one of these books in the Ihya Ulumuddin, that it is more praiseworthy. It's better for a child to be placed in a class with other students as opposed to learning himself.
Oh, okay.
Okay, why is that so? Because when he is placed in that, there is some I would say friendly competition, quote unquote, between the students that will allow him to seek improvement.
Okay.
Right, because he want to be better than his peers in that sense. Okay, but only in that sense. But if you are actually referring to the modern system, because education is placed in the capitalistic context, and when we say capitalistic, that means there is this idea that of scarcity everywhere.
Okay.
Of everything, scarcity of jobs, scarcity of whatever it is, kan. Then competition is not just an instrument.
Okay.
It is the end goal itself. You understand?
I see. Okay.
So when we talk about competition, we are trying to instrumentalize competition for other end goals. Excellence.
Okay.
As what we call fadilah, ihsan and so on. We want to instrumentalize that. But unfortunately, when we talk about competition in the modern sense, it is the goal itself.
It is, yeah.
Competitiveness is the goal itself.
I see.
So that becomes very unfortunate, and it creates the chaotic situation that we have today lah. That we are always made to be chasing after something, and that something is not clear to us.
I see.
So that is also the notion, the modern notion of progress also. Progress towards what?
Okay, I see.
Right.
So what is the end goal lah? In other
What
words,
is the end
like,
goal? The end goal is not clear. As what I also always mention lah. Competition to them is the end goal, because what change is everything, right? In some sense also the Darwinian understanding of things kan, is also sense in that. The survival of species kan. In order for you to survive, you must be competitive. Okay. But we don't have to think like that, isn't it?
Yeah, correct. The worldview is different.
Yes, the worldview is different.
God is abundant. God has abundance basically. There's no scarcity there. So in that viewed from that lens, the idea of competition is moot lah.
Yes.
Right? It's basically what he competing for. He has so much to give, you see.
I see.
In that sense. Okay, but we have to think about how to navigate this, because I think people are going to ask a lot of questions about.
Of course. We understand the realities of the system is like that, and how we should understand our vision of truth and reality is another. To navigate that, of course, is a different thing altogether. It requires a lot of wisdom, quite a lot of experimentation. But this is our struggle. Yeah, and the problem here is some people they don't even struggle. They just continue. Just follow the flow.
Not aware lah.
Not aware of things. Then they are transformed to something else.
Okay.
Rather than trying to preserve your intellectual tradition, you become subsumed into another intellectual tradition and become a human being of another kind. Yeah.
So you become part of the rat race.
But remember, the races are for rats, not for human beings. So if you're a human being in the proper sense, should we be racing? That is something that we need to.
Okay, let's say if I have a child yang dia cannot take it when he loses, he always wants to win. So kalau dia kalah, macam even simple games, kalau dia kalah, dia akan nangis, dia akan macam like berontak gitu semua lah. So is that a good trait? Because like in a way we can channel it into bagus punya kan, because he always wants to improve himself and be better. But is there like macam a downside to it, and how do we macam balance it lah? Like if a child is like that, Yeah.
That's a good question, because Imam Al-Ghazali also like that. Yes.
He was also the kind yang
he was also the kind that always wants to win. So in other words, when he goes into a debate, he will make sure he prepare himself, and he will triumph over his adversary. But then he realized at the end of the day that these things, although it helped him to be who he is, but it should not be the end goal of it.
I see.
So
it's a good trait, but just need to channel it
correct, channel it correctly. Yeah, that's true.
I would rather a child who hates to lose than a child who doesn't mind losing or winning. Any day, I'll pick the guy who hates to lose.
But that you can associate as a form of courage as well.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, because you feel threatened. So what is your response to it? You use your anger to that when channeled correctly become courage.
Use your anger.
All these sub virtues can be situated along these extremes of syaja'ah is in the middle, and then temperance is syaja'ah, courage, right? And then wisdom. So all other things. so the thing is that if people are more mindful of this kind of how Al-Ghazali has categorized these things, I think they can view things in a more positive sense. In that sense.
And of course, the hope is to navigate the harsh realities of
inshallah,
the system that we are in.
Okay lah. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you
for sharing so much of your thoughts. I would really like to get my hands on your book. Kita post dia punya buku sekali lah.
Post the link.
Inshallah, with what we have learned today, we will try to hopefully shed some light into navigating the challenges of the modern system. Inshallah. Okay, next time. Assalamualaikum.